Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Thursday, November 6th, 2025, and Eurovision. Canada's going to join Eurovision according to the new budget, which is probably a mistake. And there are many mistakes that are being made in this budget. And 6 months to steal an election, I think Carney is... People wouldn't have accepted a naked Liberal majority. But 6 months later, after the Liberal minority doesn't get anything done and you get 3 floor crossers, oh, that's totally believable. So that's fine. And that's how this whole thing is going to come to pass. And then they're going to censor the internet. And I wish I was wrong, but it doesn't seem like I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I've misread this situation somehow, but it seems like we are watching our elections get stolen 6 months after the fact on the same day, November 5th, remember the 5th of November, right? November 5th, that Mamdini was elected in New York. So this is a big win for the globalists, right? Here's your majority, Mr. Carney. And the Liberals are celebrating this budget, a doubling of the spending, right? This is a very, very big spending budget. This is not a tighten our belts kind of budget. The Crown has filed appeals against both Chris Barber and Tamara Lich, and Chris Barber and Tamara Lich both filed appeals to their convictions as well. So everybody's looking to change how things went, but it's very interesting how all of this is folding out. It seems very... The process is the punishment, right? You're going to go through all of this, and that's going to be more punishment than actually getting like a clean sentence and stuff like that. 2 more floor crossers in the wings. Yeah, I said that. That's how they're stealing this latest election. Brookfield defies a parliamentary order. I'm shocked, I tell you. I cannot believe that they would defy a parliamentary order. My gosh. And what else? Trump speaks about Christians being slaughtered in Nigeria. I've got a couple of Trump things on Mamdini as well, talking about that. Some of the things he seems really chill about, and he says, oh yeah, we're going to deal with it. Other ways he says it's very dangerous. So it's interesting. There's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we've got to start with the budget. Everybody's responding to the budget. Everything's going well. All of the budget stuff is still flying around, and it's kind of up in the air. But I think that I've sussed out how this is all going to settle, and it's going to basically we're going to be told this is how it is because your safety, comrade. That's what's going to happen, unfortunately. Ryan says, let them eat cake. Champagne's budget and Processo prudence at the Met. And so Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne Centre celebrates with fellow Liberals and hundreds of other politicos who packed the Metropolitan Brasserie on November 4th at the post-budget Prudence and Presco, I'm sorry, I'm getting it terribly wrong, party hosted by Politico and the Earnscliffe Strategies, the Hill Times, photographed by Stuart Benson. So they're all happy and excited that they've passed this poop sandwich of a budget. And here's Ryan from the write-up. He says, Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne Centre celebrates with fellow Liberals and hundreds of other politicos. Oh, I've already read that. So there you go. That's what's going on. They're super pumped about this garbage budget. Canada Proud says that's over $60 billion of your tax dollars going towards absolutely nothing. Canada's debt is so high that 13% of Carney's new budget is devoted solely to paying off debt. For context, that's more than the Liberals will be spending on healthcare. So the Liberals are adding another $80 billion of debt. So it's inflationary, and it is going to cause more taxes somewhere down the line. Here's Michael Chong, and he's talking about this. He says, last July, ratings agency Fitch warned a material rise in Canada's deficits and debt to GDP could lead to a credit downgrade. The budget doubles deficits and increases debt to GDP. It's also generationally unfair. It saddles younger Canadians with a mountain of new national debt. It also saddens them, but it saddles them with it. Here is Michael Chong talking about this.
The honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, the last Liberal budget had a fiscal anchor of deficits of less than 1% of GDP. This budget doubles those deficits, averaging 2% of GDP. The last Liberal budget had a fiscal anchor of declining debt to GDP. This budget increases debt to GDP. Will the government admit that its fiscal anchor is weaker than the previous Trudeau government's?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Speaker, I know they're having a bad week over there, but yesterday we tabled an historic budget to build our economy for Canadians, by Canadians, so we will never be reliant on one country again. We will spend less on wasteful spending so we can invest in our country and build our country, our economy, into the strongest economy in the G7. Mr. Speaker, from Canadians from coast to coast to coast, support our budget. It's time for us to come together in this House like Canada. Time for the party opposite to support our budget.
Is he doing a Chris Farley?
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, last July, bond rating agency Fitch warned that a material rise in the debt to GDP and a material rise in our deficits could lead to a credit downgrade. This budget doubles deficits and leads to ever-increasing debt to GDP. Will the government acknowledge that it is putting this country's credit rating at risk, not only to mention that it's saddling younger Canadians with a mountain of national debt?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of young Canadians are looking at this budget for generational opportunities. We are unlocking new markets for them. Budget 2025, we're getting young Canadians, young entrepreneurs ready to get export ready through our SMA readiness program. Secondly, once they're export ready, we will launch the Can Export program to support them, attend trade shows globally to showcase their goods. And once they have orders ready to go out, EDC will step in to support them to get into new markets around the world. This is how we're helping young Canadians and young entrepreneurs access new markets and create jobs here at home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To get them export ready. Huh. Weird, right? Are we just exporting to China now? The whole point, and go to trade shows in China? Is that what they're doing? We're going to support you guys going to China. Hope you don't end up like the two Michaels. Okay, fingers crossed. Next question. Pierre Poilievre is responding to the National Post. National Post on the 4th says, Trudeau or Carney, Ottawa still thinks it knows best. And that's very nanny state, very we're gonna do it for you. And the only way it can be done right is if we do it, right? Says the government. I'm here to help, which is a terrifying term coming from the government. Pierre Poilievre says every time Liberals get involved, Canadians pay the price. They chased away capital, killed projects, strangled housing, and made groceries and heat unaffordable. Let workers build, innovators invest, and Canadians succeed without Ottawa jamming its fingers into every corner of the economy. And the managed economy that Canada wants to have has incompetent people at the head of it, which is shocking, but not all that shocking. Here is trending politics, and they say, watch Mark Carney bites back at Conservatives, says the industrial carbon tax doesn't boost inflation. But it does boost inflation. He's citing all sorts of studies and things that say it doesn't. But if I've learned anything since COVID, it's that the experts are lying and the studies are manufactured in order to justify this crap. Period. Oh yeah, the carbon tax doesn't add to inflation, except that when they took off the consumer carbon tax, inflation cooled. There's lots of evidence. Saskatchewan took off all carbon taxes from everything, I think, and their inflation rate dropped to the lowest in the country. And so it is inflationary. It doesn't matter what experts or what studies say. All of these things are engineered, are built through. It's like having a tobacco company have a study that says camel tobacco is very good and safe, right? That's what our study says. And I don't know, take it up with the people who did the study. Sure, we pay them and whatever, and you can't, it's proprietary. So you can't dig into it too much, but that's what their conclusion was. So we're going with it. And this is the same nonsense. They're shopping this. It's not real. It's fake. And anybody with half a brain knows it. And so Carney's saying it because clearly he doesn't have half a brain. Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, in the spring, this government removed the divisive consumer carbon tax. And that has a consequence. That is a consequence for any business, any farm that emits less than 50 kilotons, which is every farm across this country. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Climate Institute has done the analysis, and the impact of the industrial carbon tax on inflation is zero.
We investigated ourselves and we have come to the conclusion that there is no misdeeds. Everything's above board. Next question. So there you go. CBC Watcher is highlighting this headline from the National Post. After warning about austerity measures, Carney delivers a spending budget. Carney warned Canadians that his first federal budget would include austerity measures. CBC Watcher says Don Drummond, a former high-ranking executive at the Department of Finance and chief economist at TD Bank, said the Carney government's first budget showed a commitment to large spending increases and deficits for the next few years, despite Canada's trade woes and other looming threats. It's definitely not an austerity budget, he said. No, it's a huge spending budget, right? $80 billion in new spending is not an austerity budget. Here is Anita Anand, and she says Canada's fiscal position is strong with AAA credit rating, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, a top destination among G20 countries for foreign investment. So I think the bet here basically is if they downgrade Canada's AAA rating, they're going to be putting at risk all the other G7 countries that have a higher net debt to GDP ratio than Canada does. And so, but maybe that's not the right bet, because if you actually look at all of the debt, instead of just the federal debt, like if you just look at the federal debt, that's one picture and it's terrible. But if you actually add all of the provincial debt to the federal debt, one taxpayer, remember, it looks even worse, right? And so if you do the math on just the federal debt, it looks one way in the when compared to the G7. But if you add all of the provincial debt and you include it all for the one taxpayer, it paints a very different picture when compared to the G7. So they can say this, right? They can have their experts say this, but it's bullshit. It's just bullshit, because they're only, it's like another comparison is when they measured inflation and gas was part of the basket of goods that they would measure. And then they decided gas was too volatile and increasing too much, so it would skew the quote real inflation that people are feeling. You know, aside from that gas inflation, because that doesn't count for some reason, we're not going to count that, right? And so when numbers get uncomfortable, they just drop them from the numbers, and the politicians say, "Oh, well, that looks much better, right? Oh, inflation's 7%, that's high, but manageable. Not 20%, right? Right. Wink, right? So like, we're getting screwed because of these people doing stuff like this, and the bet is a sound bet. The bet is a sound bet if the other countries are measured by net debt to GDP. If they're not measured by that, then not as good a bet. But there's a scale of betting, right? Like if all of the other G7 countries are actually measured in net debt to GDP, then this is a great bet, right? But if 50% are measured that way, then it's you could hedge that bet, but we're not. But you could, right? It's not as sure a bet. And then if no countries are measured like that, it's not a good bet at all. And I genuinely don't know. So, but I do know that Canada has been trying to, through the use of splitting in the budget, how they measure debt and quote spending, investments and things like that. They're trying to make the case for more spending, and they've tabled the budget separating out these things in order to make the case for more spending. And people are crossing the floor to get on board because they love this plan, which is it's a terrible plan. It's going to be inflationary. It's not going to be a good plan. And she says we're a top destination among G20 countries for foreign direct investment. Are you talking fentanyl and human trafficking? Because yes, I guess technically you're right, but I'm not sure that's a good thing. So Wealth Moose says, here's a thread, but the budget has some wild line items. Let's review. 100. I have not verified all of this, so I know there are some weird things in this, but I haven't had a chance to read through the budget, and I haven't even asked Grok to read through the budget yet. So apologies, but I believe this to be accurate. So we will read through this, and if I'm wrong, I will let you know. It does happen sometimes, and I do try and tell you. Wealth Moose says $150 million to CBC and exploring the Canada joining Eurovision. Eurovision. Have you seen Eurovision? Again, I have family in England, and we went to England often when I was like young, under 12. And so when we were there were 4 television channels. 4, honestly, genuinely 4. Everybody had 4 television channels: BBC 1, BBC 2, ITV, and Channel 4. That's it. And that's what we watched. And so Eurovision was on, and my cousin Kate was watching Eurovision, and it was like some Swedish band, and they were winning, like big time winning. Everybody knew the hands down favorite. And I was like, this is some crazy pop music. And so Eurovision is not very culturally harmonized, with what Canada would put out. Like we would stick out in our lumberjack outfits and turbans, right? Like we'd stick out. I promise you. So it's one of those things, but maybe not so much. Modern Europe, maybe not so much. I don't know. But it is a weird thing to have Canada spending more money on the CBC, and specifically on this initiative, not so good. $43 million for the National Listening Initiative. We're paying consultants so government can listen better. Oof. That's not $43 million worth. Yeah. $17.9 million to modernize government social media messaging, taxpayer funded content strategy. That's going to be great. There's a movie, and the movie person was an expert. Maybe it was like a Mad Men movie or something like that. No, it wasn't Mad Men. He was talking about how maybe it was like a training or something that I went to, but he was talking about how corporate initiatives are really obvious because they've got like the executives from the corporation that like this status and nobody else likes this status, right? And you can see the branding and it's cross-platform and it looks really good, but it doesn't hit. And you can see it because, right, nobody else is liking it. And each one of those likes cost a lot of money because it was a corporate strategy and it fell on its face and it didn't do anything, but it cost a lot of money because everybody got paid who rolled that strategy out. It was a quote success, but in that it got delivered, but it didn't actually deliver the people that it was supposed to deliver, right? And so that's what our corporate strategy, our corporate government strategy for messaging is going to get us. Yay. And they block people, right? Like we're in an era of the modern internet where everybody thinks I'm going to block them and they're not going to be able to do anything. And if they even take it to Reddit to have a conversation, then then the mods on Reddit will remove them for being hateful or something like that, right? And so we're in a place of like mass censorship already. It's crazy. It's absolutely wild. Anyway, number 4, $32 million to regulate how Netflix and TikTok should show us Canadian content. That's algorithm engineering. They're already algorithm engineering. $28 million for public service workers, anti-isolation culture support, therapy for remote bureaucrats. I'm so sad, but happy. I'm so sad that I work from home and I'm isolated, but I'll never go into work. Don't ask me to go into work. That's anxiety inducing. So it's a catch-22. $63 million to develop a federal K-12 digital citizenship curriculum. Ottawa is shaping classroom ideology. No thanks. $8 million for a government-funded climate fiction writing program. Yes, climate novels. Building $219 million for building greening teams, mostly admin staff, not retrofits. $48 million for sustainable tourism experience design, climate mindfulness trail planning. $11 million for holiday event coordination, federal Christmas party planning. That's a lot of money, $11 million. And Canada didn't get a budget. We got a messaging document with a check attached. Yep. So it's pretty brutal stuff. Here's Jamil Giovanni, and he's talking about, we're already at 20 minutes. I'm not even halfway through. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be a long show. He's talking about the budget is not doing anything for addictions or young men other than giving them more drugs, really. So here's Jamil.
We are looking at a situation here, especially, I want to point out the addiction issue in particular because everyone across Canada, we all know somebody, a friend, a family member, we all know somebody who's struggling with this stuff. Opioids have flooded into our country over the last decade. People need help. Addiction and substance abuse, toxicity deaths, emergency room visits, all disproportionately affect men in this country. And if you want to take the addiction issue seriously, you cannot leave boys and young men out. You can't. In the entire 493-page budget document, addiction is mentioned one time. One time in 493 pages. And they don't mention giving more support for that to help Canadians get through it. Instead, they just say no additional funding will be provided. When you see these crazy, wild Monopoly man numbers, $78 billion deficit, I know it sounds like such a large amount of money. It's hard to even realize what that even looks like. But at minimum, when you hear that much of your money, that much of your taxes is being spent by the government, you deserve your problems to be solved and addressed, and that is the problem, is it's not happening. We will continue fighting for boys and young men in this country. We will continue fighting for all Canadians being ignored, neglected, and marginalized by the Liberal government here in Ottawa.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen much of it before. I haven't seen much of the fighting. Evan Solomon says, every budget is a story, and Budget 25 is about empowering Canada together, driving growth, supporting communities, and laying the foundations for a stronger, more united country for generations to come. Nope. I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen any of that in this budget. Tamara Litch is talking about Evan Solomon's painting scandal, and she says, isn't this cute? I asked Grok about Evan's scandal. The Evan Solomon painting scandal refers to the 2015 controversy where the CBC fired journalist Evan Solomon for taking secret commissions on art sales to prominent individuals he met through his work. The scandal involved Solomon allegedly brokering deals with people like Jim Balsali, Mark Carney receiving secret 10% commissions, which created a conflict of interest. Now he's a cabinet minister for a make-believe ministry under Mark Carney, the AI ministry. And what's his name? The same guy who called the mortgage collapse, the mortgage fraud in the United States and the subprime mortgage collapse. Michael Burry, I think. He runs the group that does the investments and stuff. He says that AI is the next bubble, and he's shorted Palantir and NVIDIA. So interestinger and interestinger. Here is, I thought I had no, that's done. Here is, we have to talk about floor crossing, and Michael Barrett is talking about how the first floor crosser had one message when it was election time, and now he's changed his message. Here we go.
Well, as I told your colleagues upstairs, all the questions should be for Mr. d'Entremont this morning. I would encourage you to look at his own words about his Prime Minister. We've been very consistent about what we've said our expectations were for this budget. And Mr. d'Entremont, let me just share with you his own words. He said that, quote, "We warned that the Liberals' out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible, but of course they did not listen. Now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said that he would be judged by the cost of the grocery store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they're not impressed." So that's what Mr. d'Entremont had to say about Prime Minister Carney. And so here we have, as a member of Parliament, and Mr. d'Entremont, who said one thing and is now doing another, who said one thing to his constituents, that he would fight for an affordable budget to provide affordability for Canadians, and that's certainly not what we've seen. I can tell you that, along with my Conservative colleagues, that what we've said we wanted, we were very clear with the Prime Minister, gave him the opportunity to consult and to make adjustments where needed. If we truly are at this turning point, well, I'll tell you what the turning point is. It's more Canadians turning towards food banks because they can't afford to feed themselves. You look at Deloitte's report about the food packaging tax that the Liberals have kept in place, raising the price of fresh produce by 30%. You look at the industrial carbon tax and the effect that farmers are telling us that it's having on raising prices for consumers. That's why we're seeing people struggling with this affordability crisis. So I can tell you that it's pretty rare that a budget getting dropped and before we caucus for us to be able to say how we're going to vote on it, but it's crystal clear that the Prime Minister was not interested in providing an affordable budget for Canadians, and he's looking instead to try and provoke some kind of costly election. We're looking. That's a question for Mr. d'Entremont.
From your perspective.
Yeah,
But
what do you think about him saying that other colleagues might join him? That he doesn't think he's the only one? Are you worried about other Conservatives crossing the floor and giving the Liberals
I'm not going to
a majority?
engage in speculation on rumors. I'm going to tell you that it is crystal clear that this is not a budget that provides affordability for Canadians, and that's what they expect, that's what they deserve, and that's how we're going to vote. Have a great day.
So there you go. But the Conservatives don't have enough to bring this down. This guy's talking about how the structure of our system is that people vote for representatives of parties. They don't vote for the people. They're voting for the party. And I think he's right. And he says, I think he's in Nova Scotia, which is where the floor crossing d'Entremont is. And so here's this guy.
I usually don't talk about politics, but I feel like this should be a pressing matter that should be talked about, as I am a Canadian. And what we're going to be talking about is Chris d'Entremont crossing the floor over to the Liberals after threatening to leave the Conservative Party. And the main reason I have a big stink about this is because this is under the idea that people voted for Chris because of him and not because of the party he stood for. I think this is just factually untrue. People do not vote for the person, and especially in a federal election, they vote for the party. But this isn't 1882 anymore, guys. If somebody is to cross the floor and join a different party, that should trigger an automatic by-election. Give it a month or two for the Conservatives to put in a new person and allow for them to compete for that seat. The idea that I voted for a person and not the party is the craziest idea. No, that is not what happened. This should trouble you even if you're Liberal, Conservative, or NDP. This shouldn't be allowed. This is 2025, guys. Come on. I usually don't talk about politics, but I feel like this should be a precedent.
Yeah. So he's saying this is not how that works, and it is a perversion of our system to allow this kind of crap. Tracy says, Tracy is sharing a comment from somebody who reads her, subscriber or whatever. And it says, Tracy, I've never felt so used. I worked my ass off to get him that seat. Only a difference of 500 votes. Then he gives it away. How the heck do we move forward from here? Matt, campaign volunteer for D'Entremont, a gun owner. So yeah, that's a big betrayal, right? Mario says unprecedented. Michael was saying that there were rumors of other people crossing the floor. Mario is saying the same thing. He says unprecedented. It's very likely that Mark Carney will form a majority government. Rumors are that several more will cross the floor. Canadians did not vote for this. This is a betrayal to all Canadians. Yeah, sure is. Derek Sloan says they only need 2 more to form a majority. This is floor-crossing MP, hints that more Conservatives might follow him to the Liberals, and that's D'Entremont. And Tina says, breaking, you probably already know that traitor Chris D'Entremont has betrayed his constituents by crossing the floor. What you may not know is that 2 more MPs are going to cross to give Carney a majority. This is according to my source on the Hill. I have the names. And there was one person who was blamed for going to be crossing the floor, and they were trying to put pressure on him, and he said that he wasn't one of the people who was going to cross the floor. So I don't know. Mikey says Chris D'Entremont has walked into his first Liberal caucus meeting alongside the Prime Minister. He was greeted with a standing ovation, hugs, and chants of Chris, Chris, Chris. So here's that.
Hello, bonjour tout le monde. Prime Minister, your budget will pass. A good day for Canada. We're going to move forward.
So there you go. Floor crossing has consequences. Holly Doan says Commons by 177 to 163 vote passes bill granting citizenship to grandchildren of Canadians abroad. I thought it was 170. So I had seen numbers of 170 to 163. And I thought 170 wasn't enough because it was 171 for majority, at least, right? I thought it was more than 170 for a majority. So, and then I thought maybe people had abstained, but now I guess it's 177. So this is the second number that I've seen. So apologies if I've got it wrong. Sometimes I do. Anyway, Commons by 177 to 163 vote passes bill granting citizenship to grandchildren of Canadians abroad. Follows fiery debate in Commons. Without national identity, integration is impossible and the collapse of our country is inevitable. Yeah, I think that, man, there were some knockdown, drag-out debates in the House of Commons in the 60s with, and not just in the House of Commons in Canada, but in other places too, with legalization of the birth control pill, talking about how if we didn't have our own babies, then it would be a problem for maintaining our culture and maintaining Canadian society and so on and so forth. And it was laughed out of the Commons. It was dismissed as, like, oh, you're people will still have lots of kids. Like, don't worry about it. People will still, get it on. It'll just be a little bit different. And it's global. Like, it's a globalist thing that they're putting in action. And the plan was started in the 60s, and the sensible people who were against it were laughed out of the room for modern progressive sensibilities. And we followed that pattern for 70, 80 years. And if we don't stop,